Drivetime on RTE Radio 1, sponsored by Zurich. Insurance to suit your needs. Protect your home, car or van with Zurich.
Michael O'Leary, the Group CEO of Ryanair, has ratcheted up the pressure on government today by publishing an open letter to Health Minister Simon Harris, calling for the removal of what he says is the pointless 14-day visitor quarantine. Ryanair is resuming flights on July the 1st, and Mr O'Leary says the quarantine is ineffective, inaccurate and can't be policed. I spoke to him earlier and I asked him to explain why.
Well, because it's been removed by the leading scientists and medical experts in almost every other country in Europe. Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, and this weekend Germany and France will all withdraw all travel restrictions on inbound visitors, and yet remarkably relying on their science and their medical experts. And yet in Ireland we're applying, I've just introduced an ineffective and nonsensical 14-day visitor restriction which has no basis in medical science at all.
So are you challenging our science and our medical experts?
I'm asking to explain why the science and the medical experts across Europe, led by the ECDC and EASA, have all confirmed that it's safe to go back flying wearing face masks. And yet in Ireland, the medical science seems to think that filling in some handwritten form with false addresses and contact details somehow protects us from the spread of COVID-19.
I'll come back to the forms in a minute, but it's
sure.
Face masks and a number of other measures as well that are outlined by the two organisations you talk about.
That's true.
Let's hear from another public health expert. This is Dr. Gabriel Scally. He is a public health expert. You're not. I'm not. And this is what he had to say about the value of quarantine earlier this week.
Well, I don't think you should be taking public health advice really from Michael O'Leary and Ryanair. The evidence is very clear from elsewhere in the world. You just have to look at the fantastic record of Australia or New Zealand or Taiwan. When cases have come back to the country, people coming back to the country after they've got down to zero in China, Chinese people returning, and it was only because they had quarantine in place that they were able to catch those cases being brought back into the country and avoid reinfection again. So I think the quarantine measures are absolutely spot on.
The quarantine measures are absolutely spot on. You pointed to European countries, but he can equally call up Australia, New Zealand, Korea.
Yeah, but the quarantine that they're applying in those countries doesn't allow people coming into the country to disappear onto buses, trains, taxis. It doesn't allow them to fill in a form with fake addresses and fake mobile phone numbers.
Why do you think, Michael?
Let me finish. More importantly, the authorities in those countries actually police the quarantine, whereas in this country, our authorities, whether it's the Garda Síochána or the Department of Health, admit that they cannot follow up or police this quarantine. We don't have a quarantine in Ireland.
OK, you've raised a lot of issues there. Our buses and our trains are socially distanced. But more importantly, why do you think people are going to give false information? After all, the coronavirus, it's a virus. It doesn't make you a criminal. Nobody wants to pass it on to anybody else. We're all in this together. We want to get through this. So why do you believe that everyone is going to be trying to hoodwink the authorities all of the time?
I don't believe everyone is. I'm just pointing that we don't have a quarantine in this country because the forms at Dublin Airport are entirely ineffective. And what I am pointing out is we are not, and Dr. Scally is not following the science led by the ECDC and the EASA, Europe's leading scientists and medical advisors, which recommend flying is safe as long as you wear face masks. Nowhere in their scientific recommendations or protocols do they say flying is safe if you fill in a paper form at the arrival airport.
Well, let's hear from him. This is Dr. Scally again. Is flying safe?
Well, in my view, it's a mass gathering. You can't have a couple of hundred people in a metal tube for several hours without there being a risk of transmission of the virus if there happens to be someone infected on board. I think masks will help. Having fewer passengers will help. All of that will help. But it is still a risk. There is no doubt about it in my mind.
That's Dr. Scally's response, Michael, to is flying safe.
But he's just fundamentally wrong. Can I quote you from what the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control said on the 20th of May? We relied on our specialists from EASA and the ECDC to define a set of concrete measures for the safe resumption of air travel within the EU. And they go on to say these guidelines are based on both agencies' scientific expertise and reflects the best available scientific knowledge currently available. Dr. Scally should read the scientific evidence, not blurt out stuff that he's making up himself.
And he had read the report, and in fact, I think it was Patrick Key from ASA was on RTE Radio earlier this week as well. And that question about, he said, you can never say with 100% certainty that flying is safe. But they're doing the very best they can to get aircraft back in the air. He talked about masks, but he talked about all of the other measures as well. The socially distancing, the nature of seating plans in aircraft and so on.
But they didn't go so on, Mary. You cannot have social distancing on board an aircraft or on a train or on a bus. It simply isn't possible. That's why EASA, the medical and the scientific experts of Europe, have released a protocol today which will reassure passengers that it is safe for them to fly. I'm quoting from the scientific experts. I'm not making it up like Dr. Scally.
Dr. Scally and Dr. Houlihan, and you were loud in your praise of them on Morning Ireland earlier this week, and now you're claiming they're making it up as they go along. You said they had got this country very well through the crisis.
Please don't misquote me.
I'm not misquoting you.
You are. I've given them the credit where it's due. They've done a terrific job in limiting the spread of COVID-19, but they are clearly mismanaging the release of the economy back to some degree of normality. There is absolutely no reason why, for example, you cannot go back safely flying wearing face masks. The European scientific and medical experts confirm that fact. There's absolutely no reason, for example, why you can't go to the hairdressers today as long as you're wearing a face mask. They're doing it in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, where all of the medical experts agree that it is safe. Why are we following some different science here in Ireland that isn't being followed in any other European country?
What will be the Ryanair experience for a passenger from the 1st of July?
You'll have much lower fares, and when you get on board, you'll be wearing a face mask, and our cabin crew will be wearing face masks in full compliance with the scientific evidence, and it will be perfectly safe to fly. We're, as you know, Mary, we've launched 1,000 flights daily from the 1st of July.
Okay, steady on now. Let's stay with the face masks for a minute. What type of face mask will passengers be wearing?
Whatever face mask they want. It can be medical or non-medical.
But you've read the report, haven't you, on page 22? This report that you've been referring to from the ECDC and the ASA says medical face masks are best.
Correct.
Are you going to supply them?
No. Because they have to be worn at the entry point to the airport terminal. Passengers will have to bring their own face masks. You won't be allowed into the airport terminal without wearing the face mask.
But they say here, they do say here, and you've seen it.
Finish, please. Yeah. Social distancing isn't possible in an airport terminal, so you have to be wearing the face mask before you board the aircraft.
Yeah, and I'm looking for the passage here because they say it's the non-medical face masks are not recommended to use with a minimum physical distance of 1.5 metres between individuals. Is not.
We don't disagree with that. We're recommending medical face masks.
Will you be telling that to passengers?
Yes. We have a 3-minute health and safety video. What we're calling on now is Dr. Houlihan and Dr. Scally to tell that to passengers and stop issuing nonsensical and non-scientific advice that it's not safe to fly when the scientific experts confirm that it is.
But it's very important, isn't it, that the passengers know that they need medical face masks, they know where to get them, and if they don't have them, will you supply them or will you refuse to let them on the aircraft without them?
No. They will not be allowed on the aircraft without them. They will not be allowed into the airport terminal without them.
Without medical face masks?
Yes.
Or without a face covering?
Without medical face masks is recommended, but we'll allow them on with a face covering as well.
Oh, so you will let them on with a face covering. And in relation to the seating situation, how are you going to construct that seating situation now?
The seating situation will be as it normally is.
Will you observe any social distancing between seating?
No.
Will you fill the aircraft?
Well, where we can, we'll fill the aircraft. And as the scientific evidence suggests, they will be travelling in perfect safety as long as they're wearing face masks. Social distancing, whether it's 1 metre, and by the way, we have to ask in Ireland why it's 2 metres when it's 1 metre in most European countries. Social distancing is not possible in airport terminals or on aircraft, which is why we mandate the wearing of face masks. We don't mandate filling in useless surveys at arrival airports.
Well,
but no other European country is mandating that either.
We were out at the airport during the week. My colleague Fergal Keane was out there. Nobody had an issue. Any of the people he spoke to, they didn't have an issue with filling in the locator form. And there was no indication that they were providing false information.
But not the point. I don't think people have any difficulty filling in a form. The point is that the form is useless.
Is it not a vital form in the event of having to do contact tracing?
If you have to do contact tracing, the best way to do the contact tracing is call the airline, which is what we have done for many years. We'll give you the list of contact details for all the passengers by email straight away. It will be much faster than going around trying to sort out the 120 or 130 paper forms that you collected at the airport.
Will you have an isolation area in case you find you have a COVID patient on board?
Well, we will. We won't actually, because it's not possible. I'm not sure we'll be able to find whether we have a COVID passenger on board. All we'll know is that all passengers on board are wearing face masks. And as Dr. Luke O'Neill from the Trinity School of Immunology has confirmed, where everybody is wearing face masks, the risk of the passing on COVID droplets is effectively eliminated.
Will you sell food and drink?
Limited, yes, but only bottles, pre-wrapped food and pre-wrapped drink. We're not selling teas and coffees because it involves too much physical contact. And
what's your best medical advice for people taking off their masks to take a drink or to eat something?
They will have to be, as they are allowed to, if we're taking medicines or drinks, they're allowed to lower the mask to eat or drink, but otherwise then restore the mask once they've finished eating or drinking.
Why don't you wait until, I think it's June the 18th, these quarantine guidelines that we now have are to be reviewed? Why not wait until then?
Because the quarantine is completely ineffective. Why aren't Ireland moving with the science that was already published on the 20th of May by the ECDC and EASA, which says, I can repeat again, flying is perfectly safe with these measures in place?
But you already...
What are we waiting for the 28th of June for?
You already say you have thousands of passengers already booked. So you're doing fine.
From the 1st of July.
From the 1st of July, I know, yeah, but you have thousands of passengers already booked.
Correct.
So what is the problem?
The problem is we want the withdrawal of this completely useless and ineffective quarantine, which is only being implied in Ireland and the UK, but not by any of the scientists or the medical experts in any other EU country.
Will you sell face masks on board?
No, Mary, we won't sell face masks on board because you won't be allowed on board unless you're already wearing the face mask. A bit like Irish quarantine. It's a bit late to be selling the face mask on board. It's a bit late to be introducing a quarantine only after everybody has left the airport and gone on public transport.
But better to have the proper face mask than have an inferior quality face mask or a bit of a cloth covering, surely.
To have the face mask on board before you enter the airport and before you enter the terminal, because that is what the science requires. It doesn't require an idiotic form filling at the arrival airport.
Have you travelled yourself recently on an aircraft, by the way?
No, hoping to do so shortly, sometime after the 1st of July, once we're back flying.
And you've got your face mask?
We will have my face mask, absolutely. It will improve my appearance no end, I suspect.
The Ryanair Group CEO Michael O'Leary talking to us a little earlier, and the employers group IBEC has asked the government to bring forward the phases of reopening of the economy, scrap the quarantine restrictions for people entering the country and reduce the 2 metre social distancing rule to 1 metre.